So let's talk about YouTube Premium here, because it does seem like YouTube is actually adding another benefit to being a YouTube Premium subscriber. I wouldn't really call this a brand new feature just due to the fact that it's not really a feature. It's more of like just a benefit if you do subscribe to YouTube Premium. And this brand new feature to YouTube Premium is not even a feature at all. It's pretty much where now, if you are a subscriber of this service, you will be able to beta test brand new features coming to YouTube in the near future. Before this, they really didn't have a way for people to actually like sign up for things like getting brand new features for YouTube. Basically, how YouTube actually handled rollouts of brand new features, they would pretty much just pick YouTube accounts at random and pretty much just allow them to beta test brand new features, and usually only the big people on YouTube would actually get these first. People who use YouTube all the time, or people who have like millions and millions of subscribers. But it is actually really good now that they finally found a place where people can actually sign up if they want to get the latest and greatest from YouTube. Maybe you use YouTube all the time and you want all the benefits of the premium service from YouTube Premium. Alongside that, now you can also get updates on brand new features that are coming to YouTube. You'll be able to beta test them. So it is going to be for YouTube Premium members only, as far as I'm aware. And it looks like, of course, if you're unfamiliar with YouTube Premium is about, as this article says, $11.99 a month to subscribe to this thing. So you can see it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's also not the most expensive thing in the world. And honestly, I do really think that if you are a person that really uses YouTube a lot, I really do think there is some nice benefits here. Obviously, if you're unaware, one of the biggest benefits of getting the premium membership for YouTube is the fact that you do get no advertisements whatsoever on the platform. So if you're a person that pretty much uses YouTube all the time, every single day of your life, I would highly recommend getting YouTube Premium at $11.99. And the nice thing with getting YouTube Premium, even though you don't get advertisements anymore on top of the YouTube videos, you are theoretically still supporting your favorite content creators on the platform. Each and every video that you do watch on the platform is still going to be supporting creators on there. So that's something that's also nice about YouTube Premium. It's not just like YouTube was just trying to get rid of advertisements, but still not think about their creators and the way they work their website. So that's nice. And then alongside that, you get things like you can play videos in the background if you're on things like iOS and Android. I do think you do get specific content that is only for YouTube Premium members. Overall, I think it's a really nice membership, and I also think it's nice now that YouTube Premium members will be the first people out there to actually be able to test out brand new features coming to YouTube. And it does make sense. Those are the people that should really be able to test out these brand new features anytime YouTube wants to push out new features to the site or to like their mobile application, just due to the fact that these are the people that are willing to pay a subscription fee to actually use YouTube in the first place. So these are people who are enthusiasts and they know that they really use it all the time. So it makes sense they should be beta testing all of the brand new features for YouTube. So now that's a nice little benefit for being a premium member. You will be first on the list to at least get these brand new updates for like the mobile application and the website and things like that, which is actually nice. Now the next one up for today is actually going to be about the iPad Air 4. I kind of touched on the iPad Air 4 in the previous episode, and I kind of touched on performance of this thing. Well, now it looks like we may actually have a release date for the iPad Air 4. I know this article you're looking at doesn't really state the date of the iPad Air 4's initial release date. They did say it was coming sometime in October, and it looks like it may be coming anywhere between October 13th through like the 16th. That's when this thing is supposed to be available to the public and things like that. So that's very nice. And another thing I kind of wanted to do as well is I kind of wanted to go over a little more of the performance on this thing, because there was some stuff that I accidentally left out of the last episode, and I want to kind of make this really quickly. So first of all, if you're unaware, really quickly, basically how it works is the iPad Air 4 is going to have the latest and greatest chipset from Apple, but even though this is like a mid-tier iPad, it's not going to be their high-end iPad, the iPad Pro 2020, and you're kind of wondering how is this going to perform in terms of performance, since it is a mid-level iPad. It's not their high-end iPad. And then on top of that, it wouldn't make sense to be the fastest iPad on the market, since they still, of course, have the iPad Pro 2020 line. How would that actually work? But then again, this does have the latest and greatest from Apple. It does have the A14 Bionics, and technically that should be faster than what we have in the iPad Pros, just because this one is a brand new chipset that is a little bit faster. Well, basically how it's going to work is this one is going to be faster in single core performance, and then on multi-core performance, unfortunately the iPad Pro 2020 is going to beat it in multi-core performance. So we have a little bit of weirdness going on when it comes to performance of the iPad Air 4. It's funny, it's faster in single core performance, but it's not faster in multi-core performance. So overall, technically, when you're doing demanding tasks, I still do think that the iPad Pro 2020 is going to beat it slightly in certain areas, especially if you're doing demanding tasks. Again, things like video editing, photo editing, intensive gaming. I think that's where the iPad Pro 2020 is going to outbeat this thing. And even though this thing does theoretically have, according to all these benchmarks that are coming out, have faster single core performance, I still think the iPad Pro is technically going to beat it, because there was one thing I forgot to mention when it comes to the iPad Pro. The iPad Pro still has a leg up, and that would actually be the Pro Motion Display. So even though the single core performance is faster theoretically, according to these leaks and all these benchmarks that are coming out for the Air 4, I think that Pro Motion Display will overall mean that you are going to get a much more faster device, because things will be more smoother on the screen, whereas on the Air 4 you have that 60 hertz display, so technically it should be a little bit more slower. That's probably why they did that. They decided to give this a brand new chipset, but then decided to get it only a 60 hertz display instead of their 120 hertz Pro Motion Display, just so they can balance things out and still give people a reason to actually want to go out and buy things like their iPad Pro 2020 line, because after all, that is their most expensive line that Apple actually makes at this very moment, and the only way to entice people is to actually have some additional benefits. And if you're looking for speed in general, I think the iPad Pro 2020 is still going to beat this, but it's not going to beat it like miles and miles and miles. I still think that they're so close, it's not really going to matter. And I think for the average consumer, and for most consumers, honestly, I can highly recommend the Air 4, because the Air 4 is practically just a watered down iPad Pro 2020, or even an iPad Pro 2018. Of course, you're missing the Pro Motion Display, but I think for a lot of people it's not that big a deal, especially when you're saving a lot of money here. And you can even use things like the Magic Keyboard from Apple. I think that's also very cool that they're adding this to this iPad, the Magic Keyboard, and I really do think that is a very big game changer. And then the last one for today's episode is actually going to be about the brand new Samsung Galaxy S20 Fan Edition, because I didn't even touch on this device yet. Technically, this is a new device and it's still hot, but this is kind of old news at this point, since this has been out for a little while now. But I did want to cover this because, of course, I cover technology and I cover smartphones, and this is something that really does interest me. And if you look at the Samsung Galaxy S20 FE, overall it's a really nice phone, and just like the Air 4, it's pretty much just a watered down Samsung Galaxy S20 from this year. And I think for a lot of people this is going to be the phone to actually go for. I think it cost you I'm not too sure what the price was on this thing. I think it's like $600 and something for this. I do believe, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's definitely much more cheaper than the S20 counterpart. But of course, it's not going to give you all the same features of the S20 line, of course, but that makes sense since it is a much more budget-oriented device from Samsung. but I really do think, again, this is going to be for a lot of people. And I wanted to touch base on these mid-ranged phones that come out each and every year, because I really do think for a lot of people out there who are people who aren't tech savvy, or people who aren't tech enthusiasts like myself, and for a lot of people, I really do think that the mid-budget phones are something that everyone should consider, just because you're not losing that many features compared to a flagship anymore. It used to be years and years ago when you bought a flagship device from like Apple, Samsung, or whatever the case may be. It used to be that your flagship phone would definitely stomp on everything that the mid-range phones had to offer, but that's pretty much not the case here. When we talk about things like the S20 Fan Edition, we're talking about a lot of the premium specs coming over from the S20 line coming down to the FE edition. You got really good cameras here. You got a really good screen here. The one thing that is a drawback here, of course, obviously, is going to be the materials. Usually when you have a mid-ranged phone, they do want to sacrifice something. So, of course, they're going to sacrifice in the quality of the actual build. So of course this is made out of plastic, but then again, the Note 20 regular from this year does actually have a plastic back as well, and that phone starts at $1,000. But I just really do think that for most people out there, if you were to buy a flagship versus a mid-ranged phone that costs sub $1,000, I really do think that a lot of people wouldn't even be able to notice the difference between a flagship smartphone versus a mid-range smartphone, because technically they do practically the same thing. If you think about it, you can do everything you want to do on a mid-ranged phone compared to a flagship phone. So it's kind of like, why would you want to buy a flagship phone? Sure, you do get some additional benefits here and there. Like, for instance, on a lot of mid-ranged phones, you don't get things like water resistance. You don't maybe get the same quality cameras, but they're close or almost the same. You also don't get the same clarity of the screen. But again, I just think for most people out there that these mid-ranged phones are something that you should consider. The only downside to some of these mid-ranged phones is, of course, you don't get brand new technologies like 5G technology. But if you think about it, 5G technology is still not in a good place even in 2020, and probably even in 2021. It's going to take quite some time before 5G is finally rolled out to the masses to where everybody can use it. You do have to realize with 5G, even if you can access it, 5G is very unstable at the moment. Speeds aren't reliable. It fluctuates a lot. So 5G is nice to have as like a future-proofed feature, but it's not the end-all be-all. And again, I just want to say that especially in 2020, these mid-range phones are really killing the market, and I really think for a lot of people out there, the mid-range phones are the phones that you should actually be looking at, because you do have to realize another thing. A lot of times when you buy these phones for like $1,000, usually these phones don't last you a lifetime anyway. In 3 or 4 years, you have to upgrade your phone, and these phones are expensive to begin with. So it's kind of like it's better off buying a mid-range phone for like $500-$600 or even around $300, and then later on being able to ditch the phone later when you have to upgrade, and it won't feel so bad to upgrade to a brand new phone just because you bought a mid-range phone, and they're pretty good for what it is. So props on Samsung to actually making a watered down Samsung Galaxy S20 for this year. I'm not too sure how I feel about the name FE Fan Edition. What does that actually mean? I'm assuming it means that you're probably a fan of Samsung or the Galaxy S20 line, but it is what it is. But I am glad at least these companies are recognizing that a lot of people want mid-ranged phones, and mid-ranged phones, honestly, in my opinion, are the way to go over their flagship counterparts. It's not like flagship devices should be overlooked or never looked at, because I think they still do bring something to the table. And if we never had things like flagship devices to begin with, we would never know how technology pushes the boundary. Like, for instance, with things like the expensive foldables of the world, the foldables are really changing the world, but without expensive devices like that pushing the boundaries, we would never get things like that. So there has to be a space for those phones. But I just think for most people, or a lot of people anyway, these phones are the way to go, and this is actually a very good deal. Again, I'm not too sure how much this actually costs. I think somewhere in the $600 range, but either way, this is a very killer device if you're looking for a Samsung device and you want one that's actually going to be pretty good, to be honest. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.